All right, everyone, welcome back to the show today. We are diving into some serious political drama north of the border.
Yeah.
Canada has a brand new prime minister, and this isn't, your typical, changing of the guard. We're talking about Mark Carney.
Yeah.
The guy was the head honcho of both the Bank of Canada
Yeah.
and the Bank of England.
Wow.
So, yeah, you could say he knows a thing or two about finances.
Right.
But leading a country,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole other ballgame.
It really is an unprecedented move.
Yeah.
We've never seen a central banker jump straight into the prime minister's seat,
Yeah.
especially not one with zero experience in elected office.
And he didn't just win, he crushed it.
Yeah.
I mean, a landslide victory against some, seasoned politicians. Almost 86% of the vote.
Wow.
I mean, what does that tell you about the public's mood right now?
Well, it's a clear sign that Canadians were hungry for change. Remember the context here. Trudeau was facing some serious headwinds before he stepped down.
Right.
A housing crisis that just wouldn't quit.
Yeah.
The cost of living skyrocketing.
Yeah.
People were feeling the pinch.
Yeah.
And that created the perfect opening for someone like Carney to come in and promise a fresh start.
Okay, so we've got this political outsider
Right.
swooping in with this massive mandate for change.
Mm.
But let's not forget the other elephant in the room,
Yeah.
the U.S.-Canada trade war.
Right.
And, of course, it's none other than Donald Trump fanning the flames south of the border.
Yeah.
Carney's already thrown some pretty pointed barbs their way.
Yes.
Remember that line about Canada winning in trade just like in hockey?
It was a bold statement for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it gets to the heart of what makes this situation so fascinating.
Yeah.
For decades, Canada and the U.S. have been such close allies.
Yeah.
But this trade war has exposed some serious vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Think about it. Canada relies heavily on the U.S. for trade.
Mm.
So when Trump slaps tariffs on Canadian goods,
Right.
claiming unfair practices, it sends shockwaves through the entire Canadian economy.
Right.
And Carney, in his very first weeks as PM, is basically drawing a line in the sand,
Yeah.
saying we won't be bullied.
So we're not just talking about, economic policy here.
Right.
It's about national pride. Standing up to a global superpower.
Yeah.
It feels almost Shakespearean, doesn't it?
There's definitely a dramatic element to it.
Yeah.
And the stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah.
A full-blown trade war could push Canada into a recession.
Right.
It would impact industries across the board, from lumber to dairy to auto manufacturing.
Wow.
We're talking about people's livelihoods here.
And this tension is palpable even on this side of the border.
It is.
I mean, Carney hasn't minced words calling these dark days.
Mm-hmm.
Brought on by a country Canada can no longer fully trust.
That statement, more than anything, signals a potential turning point in U.S.-Canada relations.
Yeah.
We could be witnessing a shift away from that traditionally close partnership.
Right.
And that has major implications for everything from security to environmental policy.
So what's the game plan here?
Right.
How does Carney navigate this mess? Appease Canadians who want action and maybe even come out on top.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that, starting with how this finance guy even ended up as prime minister.
Right.
I mean, talk about an unexpected career pivot.
Well, think back to those election night results.
Yeah.
Massive voter turnout.
Right.
People ecstatic about a leader who promised something different. Canadians were tired of the status quo.
Yeah.
And they saw in Carney someone outside the usual political circles. They wanted a fresh perspective.
Yeah.
Someone who might understand the complexities of the global economy in a way career politicians might not.
Yeah, the public's reaction was incredible. Remember those videos of the victory celebrations?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was like they'd won the Stanley Cup, not just an election.
Yeah.
But let's dig into the nitty-gritty here.
Yeah.
What does Carney actually bring to the table, besides these impressive credentials? How's he planning to tackle this trade war monster?
Right. Well, his approach has been interesting, to say the least.
Yeah.
It's this mix of calculated aggression and strategic maneuvering.
Right.
Remember those tariffs he imposed on U.S. imports?
Oh, yeah.
They're still in place.
Right.
And he's made it clear they're not going anywhere until the U.S. shows some respect.
Yeah, it's like he's playing hardball. But at the same time, he's been pretty vocal about wanting to diversify Canada's trading partners.
Well,
I mean, is that even realistic?
yeah.
Can Canada really lessen its dependence on the U.S. economy?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's been forging new trade deals with countries in Europe and Asia,
Yep.
and he's even talking about strengthening ties with Mexico.
Right.
It's a long-term strategy,
Yeah.
but it's essential if he wants to give Canada more leverage in these trade negotiations.
So there's this whole geopolitical chess game happening behind the scenes.
Right.
But what about everyday Canadians?
Ooh, yeah.
How do Carney's policies actually impact their lives?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
He's running on a platform he calls responsible prosperity.
Mm.
And it's this blend of traditional economic policies with a focus on sustainability and social responsibility.
Okay.
Take his approach to pipelines, for example.
Okay, pipelines. I know this is a hot button issue,
It is.
especially with the whole climate change debate.
Right.
How's Carney handling that tightrope walk?
Well, he's actually been a vocal advocate for pipeline expansion, arguing that it's crucial for getting Canadian oil to international markets.
Right.
He's framed it as a way to boost the economy and create jobs.
Right.
And this is the key part.
Yeah.
He's also pledged to invest heavily in renewable energy sources and implement stricter environmental regulations for the industry.
So it's not a simple, drill, baby, drill approach.
Right.
There's an attempt to balance economic growth with environmental concerns.
Exactly. He's trying to thread that needle,
Yeah.
which, as you can imagine, is making both sides of the debate a little uneasy.
Right.
The environmental groups are wary of any new pipeline construction,
Right.
while some in the energy sector argue that the regulations are too stringent and will stifle investment.
Right.
It's a delicate balancing act, and only time will tell how successful he'll be.
Okay, pipelines check. What about housing? I mean,
Yeah.
that was a major issue under Trudeau, with
Yeah.
prices going through the roof, especially in cities like Toronto and Vancouver.
Carney has acknowledged that the housing crisis is a top priority.
Okay.
He's proposed a number of policies aimed at increasing the supply of affordable housing, things like tax incentives for developers and streamlining the approval process for new construction.
So is he basically trying to make it easier and cheaper to build more homes?
That's the general idea.
Okay.
But of course, there are always unintended consequences.
Right.
Some critics argue that focusing on new construction won't do enough to address the immediate needs of people struggling to afford rent right now. They're calling for more investment in social housing and rent control measures.
Yeah.
It's a complex problem with no easy solutions.
And this all ties back to that idea of reducing Canada's reliance on the U.S., right?
Yeah.
It's not just about trade. It's about building a more self-sufficient economy, one that's less vulnerable to external shocks.
Precisely. Carney's vision for Canada is one that's more diversified,
Right.
more innovative,
Yeah.
and ultimately more resilient.
It's a compelling vision, but can he actually pull it off?
Right.
I mean, we've talked about the challenges of the trade war,
Yeah.
the complexities of domestic policy, but what about the political landscape?
Right.
Is there even enough support for these ambitious plans?
Well, remember, he's leading a minority government,
Right.
which means he needs the cooperation of other parties to pass legislation.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, the conservative opposition, led by Pierre Poilievre,
Right.
they've been relentless in their attacks,
Yeah.
calling Carney out for being a global elite who's out of touch with the needs of everyday Canadians.
And what about that Brookfield controversy?
Oh, yeah.
That seemed to blow up right before the election.
It did.
Didn't they accuse Carney of lying about his role in moving the company's headquarters from Toronto to New York?
That's right. The Conservatives have seized on that issue,
Yeah.
portraying it as evidence that Carney isn't truly committed to Canada's best interests.
Right.
It's definitely a stain on his image,
Yeah.
especially since he's always presented himself as this squeaky clean technocrat.
So he's got political opponents gunning for him, a trade war brewing,
Right.
and these massive policy goals. It sounds like he's got his work cut out for him.
He does.
What are the chances he can actually survive all this, let alone succeed?
It's really too early to say.
Right.
He's only been in office for a few weeks,
Right.
and there are so many variables at play. The political landscape in Canada is notoriously unpredictable.
Speaking of unpredictable, what's the mood among Canadians right now? Are they optimistic about Carney's leadership, or are they starting to have second thoughts?
It's a mixed bag, really.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of goodwill from that landslide victory,
Right.
and many Canadians are willing to give him a chance. But there's also a healthy dose of skepticism, especially among those who feel he hasn't done enough to address the immediate challenges they're facing,
Right.
like the rising cost of living.
So it's a honeymoon period,
Mm.
but the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
He needs to start delivering on those promises and fast.
Right.
But let's zoom out a bit
Okay.
and look at the bigger picture here. What does Carney's rise to power this whole trade war drama?
Right.
Tell us about the state of global politics.
It's a fascinating case study in the shifting dynamics of power.
Hmm.
You know, for so long, Canada has been content to play the role of the U.S.'s reliable neighbor.
Yeah.
But now under Carney, they seem to be asserting their independence on the world stage.
Right.
And it's not just Canada.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing similar trends in other countries.
Yeah.
A pushback against globalization, desire for more national sovereignty.
Right.
These are big, complex issues.
Yeah.
And they're playing out right in front of us in real time.
It's almost like a political drama unfolding, except the stakes are incredibly real.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the potential scenarios here.
Okay.
What are the chances that Carney can actually stay in power long enough to implement all these plans?
Well, for starters, if you're interested in the North American economy, this is a huge deal.
Yeah.
A trade war between the U.S. and Canada. I mean, could have ripple effects throughout the entire continent. Think about supply chains.
You're right.
The price of goods.
Yeah.
Even the job market.
Right.
What happens in Canada doesn't stay in Canada.
Right.
Especially when their biggest trading partner is right next door.
Yeah, it's all connected.
Exactly. And it's not just about the economics.
Yeah, right.
What's happening in Canada right now is a reflection of larger global trends. We're seeing a rise in populism,
Yeah.
a questioning of traditional alliances, and a redefinition of what it means to be a nation in the 21st century.
Right.
These are big, complex issues,
Yeah.
and they're playing out right in front of us in real time.
It's almost like a political drama unfolding,
Yeah,
except the stakes are incredibly real.
they are.
But let's talk about the potential scenarios here.
Okay.
What are the chances that Carney can actually stay in power long enough to implement all these plans?
Well, he's facing a few hurdles.
Yeah.
As we mentioned, he's leading a minority government,
Right.
which means he needs the support of other parties to pass legislation. And the opposition parties, especially the conservatives, are smelling blood in the water.
Yeah.
They're going to be pushing for a no-confidence vote at every opportunity, hoping to trigger a snap election.
So it's like he's walking a tightrope,
He is.
trying to balance his ambitious agenda with the need to keep the government from collapsing. What are the main parties he's up against?
Right.
And what are their stances on all this?
Well, the biggest threat comes from the conservatives led by Pierre Poilievre.
Right.
They're hammering on the message that Carney is just another out-of-touch elite, more concerned with global finance than with the struggles of everyday Canadians.
Yeah.
They're pushing for tax cuts, deregulation, and a more hardline stance in the trade war with the U.S.
So kind of a Canada First approach, but with a more traditional conservative flavor?
You could say that.
Okay.
They appeal to a certain segment of the population that feels left behind by globalization and wants a return to simpler times.
Right.
Then you have the Bloc Québécois,
Yeah.
who represent the interests of Quebec. They're focused on preserving Quebec's autonomy within Canada and tend to be more left-leaning on social issues.
And what about the New Democrats?
Yeah, the New Democrats, they're usually further to the left-right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're more aligned with Carney on things like climate change and social programs. But they're also critical of his ties to big business in his centrist approach.
Right.
They're pushing for more radical reforms, like universal basic income and nationalized health care.
So it's a pretty diverse political landscape with a lot of competing interests.
It is.
It sounds like Carney's going to have to be a master negotiator if he wants to get anything done.
He will.
But let's get back to that question we posed earlier.
Okay.
Can he actually win this trade war?
That depends on what winning looks like.
Right.
Does it mean forcing the U.S. to back down and remove all tariffs? That's unlikely.
Yeah.
But it could mean securing more favorable trade deals with other countries, diversifying Canada's economy, and ultimately reducing their reliance on the U.S.
So it's more about playing the long game?
Yeah.
Positioning Canada for a future where they're less vulnerable to the whims of a single trading partner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where Carney's background in finance and international economics could give him an edge.
Yeah.
He understands how global markets work. He has connections all over the world.
Right.
And he's not afraid to take risks.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
A political outsider rising to power,
Right.
a trade war shaking up the North American economy, and a whole set of ambitious policy goals.
Yeah.
But here's the question we want to leave you with.
Okay.
Do you think Carney can actually pull this off?
Hmm.
Can he navigate these turbulent waters and lead Canada into a new era of prosperity?
Right.
Or is this just a temporary blip,
Hmm.
a fleeting moment of excitement before things go back to business as usual?
It's a fascinating question.
Yeah,
And one that we'll be following closely in the months and years to come.
right.
The story of Mark Carney and Canada's new direction is just beginning, and it's one you won't want to miss.
And as always, we want to hear your thoughts.
Yes.
Join the conversation online using #TheDeepDive
Right.
and tell us what you think. Do you think Carney is the right leader for Canada at this critical moment?
Hmm.
Is his vision for the country too ambitious or not ambitious enough?
Yeah.
Let's keep this conversation going.
We're all in this together, trying to make sense of this rapidly changing world.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive into Canada's political shakeup. Next time we're tackling a completely different topic, something a little closer to home, we're going to be exploring the future of work and how automation and artificial intelligence are transforming the way we live and earn a living.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for that, and until then, keep diving deep.